The words sliced through the laughter like a blade through silk. "You're not real family, Ivy." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her, but the hush that fell over the dining room confirmed it. The clinking of silverware stopped. Conversations died mid-breath. All I could hear was my heartbeat thundering in my ears. My mother stood at the head of the mahogany table, her wine glass poised in her manicured hand. The chandelier light caught the cold gleam in her eyes. Around her, relatives watched in stunned silence, some smirking, others pretending not to hear. Everyone was waiting to see what I'd do. Evelyn Callahan had always been beautiful in a cruel way. Flawless skin, perfect posture, a voice soft enough to soothe and sharp enough to wound. She smiled now, that tight, rehearsed smile that made my stomach twist. "I mean, you're from my first marriage," she added sweetly, tilting her head as if she were explaining something to a child. "It's just different. You understand, don't you?" Tessa, my half-sister, snickered beside her, curling a strand of golden hair around her finger. At 23, she was everything our mother had groomed her to be. Stunning, confident, utterly lacking in empathy. "Yeah, Mom," Tessa said lightly, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's not like she's really one of us." My throat burned. My hands trembled so hard the bowl of salad I was holding rattled against the china. They were laughing. At me. In front of uncles, cousins, family friends. People I had grown up around. People I thought knew better. Someone muttered, "That's harsh," but Evelyn waved a dismissive hand, her bracelets jingling like tiny chains. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said coolly. "Ivy knows I'm joking." But her eyes never softened. She didn't want me to understand. She wanted me to break. I set the bowl down carefully on the table. My voice caught somewhere between my chest and my tongue. The humiliation pressed down on me like a physical weight. When I finally spoke, my voice came out small, foreign. "You've made your point, Mom." Her smile deepened. "Good girl," she said, like she'd won some invisible contest. Like my pain was a trophy. I walked out before I cried in front of them. Cold night air hit my face, sharp and merciless. Behind me, laughter erupted again. Softer this time, the kind people use to ease their guilt. I kept walking down the gravel path, my heels crunching in the dark. I could still hear her voice echoing inside my head, wrapped around me like poison ivy. Not real family. That night, under a moon that looked like a broken coin, I made a decision. I swore I would never give her the satisfaction of seeing me small again. My name is Ivy Callahan, and this is how I proved my worth, the only way that mattered. When I was little, I thought my mother's perfume smelled like love. It was a delicate blend of white jasmine and vanilla, expensive, imported from Paris. She'd dab it on her wrists before leaving for charity galas and country club events. I'd stand on tiptoes to be held by her, burying my face in her neck, breathing in that scent like it was air itself. It wasn't until years later I realized it smelled like control. Evelyn wasn't a mother in the conventional sense. She was a queen in her own kingdom, and kingdoms have strict laws. Her rules were absolute. Her moods, unpredictable as weather. One day she'd kiss my forehead and call me her sweet girl. The next, she'd catch me slouching at dinner and say, "Posture, Ivy. Do you want to look like your father?" Weak and disappointing. She never hit me. Her words did all the damage she needed. I was 8 when my father first taught me to play piano. He'd sit beside me on the bench, his large hands guiding mine over the ivory keys, and he'd say, "Music is truth, Ivy. It's the one thing nobody can take from you." My mother listened from the doorway once, her expression unreadable. The next day, she told Dad the piano was too loud and moved his Steinway to the basement. He never asked her to move it back. Tessa could do no wrong. If she forgot her homework, Mom would laugh and say, "Oh, my poor baby's under so much pressure." If I got an A- on a test, she'd purse her lips and whisper to her friends, Why can't you be more like your sister, Ivy? Tessa has such natural grace. By the time I was 10, I'd learned how to disappear, to move through the house like a shadow, to keep my shoes neatly by the door so she wouldn't yell about clutter, to eat quietly, speak softly, smile when required, fade when possible. Then my father got sick. It happened slowly at first, a persistent cough, weight loss, nights where he'd wake up gasping. I'd sit outside his bedroom door in my pajamas, listening to him struggle to breathe, listening to my mother's sharp voice. For God's sake, Richard, go to the hospital if it's that serious. He died on a Tuesday in March. I was 14. My mother didn't cry at the funeral. She stood by the grave in her black designer coat, eyes dry, looking almost relieved. When the priest finished speaking, she was already reaching for her phone to check her messages. That night, she sold his piano. I came home from school to find the basement empty. When I asked where it went, she said, "Coolly, we don't need reminders of him. It's morbid, Ivy. We're moving forward." But I'd kept one thing, a photograph. Me and Dad by the lake. He had his arm around me, sunlight in his smile, a piano in his eyes. He looked at me like I was his greatest accomplishment. She never knew I hid it behind a loose floorboard under my bed, because in that house, memories of him were forbidden, just like affection for me. The morning after the reunion, I woke up to silence. No apology, no text, no call, just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the emptiness of my one-bedroom apartment in the city, a place I'd rented specifically to get away from her. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, landing on the photo of me and Dad that I'd finally framed years ago, the only person who'd ever looked at me like I mattered. I made coffee, but it tasted bitter. Everything did. Then came the messages. "Hey, Ivy, don't take what your mom said so seriously. She was just being Evelyn. Tessa was joking. You know how she is. Your mom had too much wine, that's all. You know she doesn't mean these things. No one said she was wrong. No one said you didn't deserve that." I stared at my phone until my vision blurred, then set it face down on the counter. I could still hear her laugh, the delicate chime of her bracelets, the condescending tilt of her head. I could still feel the weight of their collective judgment pressing down on me like a stone. For a long time, I thought I wanted her to love me, to see me, to acknowledge that I was worth something despite not being her creation from her second marriage. Now I realized I just wanted her to stop hurting me. That night, I saw Tessa's new post online, a perfect picture of her and Mom clinking champagne glasses at some restaurant. The caption read, "Family means everything, 2 hearts, hashtag real love, hashtag so grateful, hashtag blessed beyond measure." The comments flooded in like clockwork. "Gorgeous. Such a beautiful bond. Your mom is stunning." I closed my laptop and stared at the dark screen until I saw my reflection staring back. Pale, hollow-eyed, but something new glimmered beneath the pain. Resolve. She wanted me invisible. I'd let her think I was. For now. The first real shift came a week later. I was sitting at my desk in the small classroom where I worked as an assistant teacher. The kids were loud, throwing paper airplanes, their laughter echoing off the walls. It was chaos, but a kind of chaos I could breathe in. Innocent. Forgiving. Then my phone buzzed. A name I didn't expect. Maxwell Dunn, attorney at law. My father's old lawyer. My stomach tightened as I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Ivy," he said when I picked up, his voice warm but uncertain. "I hope this isn't a bad time. I've been going through some old files, and I came across some documents your mother never filed. I think you should see them." Documents. My heart began to race. What kind of documents? "From your father's estate," he said carefully. Something was withheld. The world seemed to tilt slightly. My mother had told me there was nothing, that Dad died broke, that I was lucky she hadn't let me inherit his debts. She'd said it So many times I'd stopped questioning it. But Evelyn never gave anything without expecting something in return. Honesty was not in her vocabulary. "I need to see you," I whispered. That evening, I met Maxwell in his downtown office. The room smelled like dust and lemon polish. He was older than I remembered. His hair completely silver now, his weathered face lined with the weight of decades spent untangling other people's secrets. He handed me a thick envelope, yellowed at the corners. "Your father left you this," he said quietly. "A trust and a letter. He made sure no one else could touch it." My throat tightened. "You mean my mother didn't know?" "Oh, she knew," he said softly, his expression darkening. "She just couldn't access it. She tried. Threatened me with lawyers, called me names. Showed up at my office in tears one day. But Richard was explicit in his wishes. The trust was set up in your name alone." Something inside me stirred, a trembling kind of anger I hadn't felt in years. For once, I wasn't powerless. I sat in my apartment that night with the envelope in my lap. The edges were worn, like someone had touched it 100 times before sealing it. My fingers shook as I broke the seal. Inside were property deeds, account papers, investment statements, and a letter. The handwriting was shaky, but still his, my father's distinctive cursive, the way he always looped his FS and crossed his TS with deliberate care. "My dearest Ivy, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to tell you in person. And for that I'm sorry. Your mother doesn't believe in fairness. She never has. But I do. I always believed the world should make sense, even when it doesn't. What I built is yours, not hers, not theirs. The land, the investments, the accounts. All of it. I've made sure it's legally protected, locked away where she can't touch it, can't squander it, can't use it as a weapon. By the time you read this, you may have learned some hard truths about the woman who raised you. I hope you'll forgive me for not protecting you from her sooner. I was a coward. I chose peace over your safety, and that's my greatest regret. But I know you, Ivy. I've always known you. The real you beneath the walls she forced you to build. You're stronger than she'll ever be. Kinder. More honest. Everything she tried to destroy in you is exactly what makes you worth saving. Don't let her take your worth. You are always the light in my life. The proof I did something right. Be brilliant, sweetheart. Be free. I love you. Dad. Tears slid down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. He had left me land, 15 acres of wild field and pine trees, just outside the city. According to the documents, it was worth millions. Mom had told me she sold it after the divorce. Another lie. Just one more link in the chain of deception that had wrapped around me since childhood. I pressed the letter to my chest. "I'll make you proud, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "I promise." That night, for the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. Because I finally understood. Evelyn Callahan's empire was built on lies. And I had just found the first crack. It started with a whisper. A conversation I wasn't meant to hear. 2 weeks later, I was walking past my mother's study when I caught her voice. Low, sharp, dripping with control. "Stop calling me," she hissed into the phone. "You'll ruin everything." She's already starting to ask questions. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding. Through the crack in the door, I could see her. Evelyn Callahan, standing near her mahogany desk, still in her silk robe at 3 in the afternoon. Her mask was gone. The sweet, grieving widow everyone knew, gone. In her place stood a woman coiled with secrets. Her jaw clenched so tight the tendons stood out in her neck. She was talking to someone named Victor. The way she said his name, soft, dangerous, intimate, made my stomach twist. "I told you," she murmured, pacing now. Her fingers wrapped around a glass of wine like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "Once Tessa takes over the trust at 25, we'll have access to all the funds. By then, Ivy won't get a cent. I'll make sure of it." A pause. She listened to whoever was on the other end. "No, she said more forcefully. I don't care what you're worried about. I've been managing this family's finances for 15 years. I know exactly how to make things disappear. That was the moment something inside me cracked open. For years, she'd made me doubt my worth, gaslit me into silence, convinced me I was the problem, too sensitive, too needy, too disappointing. But now I had proof there was rot beneath her perfect world. Not just cruelty toward me, but actual crime. Theft. Betrayal of the trust my father had placed in her. When she hung up, she looked at her reflection in the glass cabinet and smiled, that wicked, satisfied smile I knew so well. I slipped down the hallway, trembling but electrified. For the first time, the pain didn't drown me. It fueled me. The next morning, Evelyn acted as if nothing had happened. She greeted me with that syrupy tone that always made my skin crawl. Good morning, darling. Did you sleep well? She set down a plate of eggs, her diamond bracelet clinking against the china. Yes, I said softly, watching her closely. You were up late last night. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she smiled again. Oh, you know me. Just sorting out bills. So tedious. Bills. That's what she called late-night phone calls to her secret lover. Tessa floated into the kitchen in her usual haze of privilege. Robe half-tied, phone in hand, not a care in the world. She was still technically living at home, saving money, while working part-time at the family business. Morning. Mom, I'll need your cardigan. The boutique said they'll hold the dress until noon. Of course, darling, Evelyn said, reaching for her purse immediately. Use the platinum one. Get yourself something nice. You deserve it. I watched the scene unfold like a cruel play I'd seen 1,000 times. Evelyn's attention, her praise, her generosity, all of it poured into Tessa like sunshine. For me, there were only cold shadows. When Evelyn caught me watching, she tilted her head and smiled faintly. Don't look so sad, Ivy. You know generosity runs in the family. You should try being more positive. That word, family, it tasted bitter in my mouth. But her desk drawer told a different story. There were transfer slips, large ones, to accounts I didn't recognize. Names like Callahan Holdings LLC and Hale Ventures Incorporated. Emails printed and highlighted in aggressive yellow marker. Even receipts for consultations with a name I couldn't forget, Victor Hale. I'd heard that name before. Victor Hale had been a business partner of my late father's years ago. According to Dad's journals, which I'd found in the basement, they'd had a falling out. Dad had written, Victor is a vulture in a suit. He'd sell his own mother if the price was right. My hands trembled as I photographed everything with my phone, careful to restore each document to its exact position. I was piecing together a picture that became clearer with each photo. My mother had systematically drained funds from my father's trust and funneled them through Victor into personal accounts. Accounts that shouldn't exist. When I heard the front door open, my heart nearly stopped. I slipped the papers back into the drawer and ducked behind the bookshelf just as Evelyn's heels clicked across the marble floor. She hummed, softly, eerily calm. Then her phone rang. Yes, Victor, she said sweetly. I told you Ivy doesn't matter. She's too trusting, too much of a disappointment to care what she thinks. She'll believe whatever story I tell her. She always does. My jaw clenched. In that moment, I made a decision. Not anymore, Mother. That night, I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, unable to sleep. Every word she'd said replayed in my mind. Her lies, her manipulation, the way she'd twisted everything to make me feel small and worthless. But what haunted me most wasn't what she'd done to me. It was what she'd done to my father. He'd trusted her with his legacy, loved her, left her in charge of his company when he got sick, believing she'd protect it for me. And she'd turned it into her private playground, siphoning money into accounts with names designed to obscure their origin. The next morning, I visited my father's grave for the first time in months. I'd avoided coming here because Evelyn always made it uncomfortable. She'd stand nearby, checking her phone, making it clear she had better places to be. I knelt beside the stone, brushing away fallen leaves. The granite was cool beneath my fingers. "Dad," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I know now. I know what she's done. All of it." A tear slipped down my cheek. "You told me once that the truth has a way of finding light. I think it's time. It's time for the truth to find its way out." A breeze stirred the trees, soft and cold. For a moment, I could almost feel him there, his hand on my shoulder, his voice in my ear. "Be brilliant, sweetheart. Be free." When I rose, I wasn't the same woman who'd arrived. The quiet, obedient daughter was gone. In her place stood someone Evelyn had never expected, the daughter who remembered everything, and I was done being silent. Tessa was the first to notice the change. She came into my room one evening a week later, curiosity flickering in her hazel eyes. "You've been quiet lately," she said, perching on the edge of my desk, "but not in your usual boring way. It's different, like you're thinking about something." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just learning from you." Her laugh was light, but something in it cracked. "Don't start thinking you can play games, Ivy. Mom's not as patient with you as she is with me." "I've noticed," I said calmly, turning back to my laptop. She frowned, her painted lips tightening. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met her eyes. "It means I'm done pretending everything's okay. It means I'm done being the invisible daughter." Tessa's face hardened. She stood up, tucking her hair behind her ear, a nervous habit I'd noticed since childhood. "You're really asking for it, you know. Mom doesn't take well to rebellion." "I know," I said quietly. She lingered in the doorway for a moment, as if she wanted to say something more. Then Evelyn's voice called from downstairs. "Girls, dinner's ready." That voice, that summons, that reminder that we were still trapped in her orbit. Tessa turned to leave, muttering, "You're going to regret this." But as I watched her go, I realized something I'd already regretted so much. I'd regretted my silence. I'd regretted my compliance. I'd regretted every moment I'd spent trying to earn the love of someone incapable of giving it. What I wouldn't regret was what was coming next. Evelyn's cruelty didn't come in storms. It came in smiles. That evening at dinner, she leaned across the table, her manicured nails glinting under the chandelier's light. The table was set to perfection. White linen, crystal glasses, flowers arranged with the precision of someone who used beauty as a weapon. "Ivy, you've been unusually secretive lately," she said, taking a delicate sip of wine. "Don't tell me you've finally found a man willing to deal with your particular disposition." Tessa laughed, nearly spitting out her wine. "Oh, please. She'd bore him to death in a week. He'd probably fall asleep mid-conversation." My fork froze midair. For years, I'd let their mockery slide off me like rain off stone. But now I was studying them, learning them. Every sneer, every flicker of insecurity. I was beginning to understand that Evelyn wasn't as invincible as she pretended. She was terrified. She just covered it with cruelty. I set down my fork carefully. "I think the right kind of man prefers honesty," I said quietly. "Something you wouldn't understand, Mother." The air shifted. Tessa's laughter died instantly. Evelyn's lips curved upward, slow and deliberate. "Careful, Ivy. You're not built for games. You always end up the loser." Her tone was sugar and venom, and yet this time I didn't flinch. "Maybe I am," I said, meeting her gaze. "But at least I know the difference between winning and living a lie." She set down her wine glass slowly. For a moment, I could see the crack in her composure, just a hairline fracture, but visible to anyone who knew where to look. "That's quite enough," she said coldly. "Eat your dinner." But even as I returned to my plate, I could feel her watching me. And for the first time in my life, The predator had caught the scent of something dangerous in her prey. I started visiting the office that Evelyn claimed to no longer manage. The Callahan Group was still branded with my father's name, but the staff had long since stopped whispering it with reverence. Under Evelyn's leadership, it had become a different kind of operation. The receptionist, an older woman named Miriam, looked startled when she saw me. "Miss Ivy? I thought you didn't come here anymore." "I'm just visiting," I said softly, glancing around the polished lobby. "Could you remind me who's handling the financial accounts now?" Her eyes flicked around nervously before she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "A man named Victor Hale. He's been coming in almost every week. Some people think he owns part of the company now, though your mother's name is still on everything officially." I thanked her and left, though my legs nearly gave way beneath me in the elevator. Victor Hale, the vulture in a suit, my father's betrayer. That night, I followed my mother's car. I watched as she parked outside a dimly lit restaurant on the edge of the city, her red coat glowing like sin under the streetlight. And then there he was, Victor, silver-haired, smug, with his hand on her lower back like she already belonged to him. She just covered it with cruelty. I set down my fork carefully. "I think the right kind of man prefers honesty," I said quietly. "Something you wouldn't understand, Mother." The air shifted. Tessa's laughter died instantly. Evelyn's lips curved upward, slow and deliberate. "Careful, Ivy. You're not built for games. You always end up the loser." Her tone was sugar and venom, and yet this time I didn't flinch. "Maybe I am," I said, meeting her gaze, "but at least I know the difference between winning and living a lie." She set down her wine glass slowly. For a moment, I could see the crack in her composure, just a hairline fracture, but visible to anyone who knew where to look. "That's quite enough," she said coldly. "Eat your dinner." But even as I returned to my plate, I could feel her watching me. And for the first time in my life, the predator had caught the scent of something dangerous in her prey. My stomach twisted, but I kept watching. I had my phone ready, my camera app open. She threw her head back and laughed, too loud, too forced, and leaned close to him, whispering something that made him smile. Through the restaurant window, I could see her hand on his arm, her expression almost girlish. This wasn't the cold, controlled woman I knew. This was someone else, someone desperate. "Once Tessa's trust matures, we'll have everything," I heard her say as they walked toward the entrance. "And then we can finally be together, openly. Everything." That word burned through me like fire. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk in the darkness, staring at the photos I'd taken. Evelyn and Victor, hand in hand. The woman who destroyed my self-worth, smiling like a teenager, drunk on betrayal and anticipation. I opened my laptop, created a new folder, and titled it Truth. Over the next 3 weeks, I began collecting everything. Screenshots of transfers, copies of call logs, old emails I found on our shared server where Victor and Evelyn discussed moving funds before the audit and keeping Ivy in the dark. Each piece was a thread in the web she'd spun, and now I was learning how to pull them apart one by one. I hired a private investigator, someone recommended by Maxwell Dunn. He came to my apartment and looked through my evidence with the quiet professionalism of someone who'd seen worse. "This is solid," he said finally. "Bank fraud, identity theft, using Tessa's information without her knowledge, embezzlement. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" That was the million-dollar question. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn grew bolder, smugger. She'd hum while setting the dinner table, talk about Tessa's bright future in the company, and make pointed comments like, "Some of us are just born to shine, Ivy. Others, they fade quietly into nothing." Her gaslighting was artful. She'd twist memories, invent stories, and say things like, "You always misunderstand me," when I called out her cruelty. But beneath her polished calm, I saw it, the small cracks forming in her confidence. Once she caught me looking at her and snapped, "What are you staring at?" I smiled faintly, just thinking how people always get what they deserve. For the first time in my life, I saw something flicker in her eyes' fear. The moment the first domino fell was unplanned. I was helping Tessa pack for a weekend trip to the spa when her phone buzzed. Mom again," she groaned, tossing it aside. She's obsessed with knowing where I am every second. When she left the room to get her toiletries, the phone lit up again. This time it wasn't Evelyn. It was Victor Hale. The preview of the message read, "Tell your mother to stop transferring funds in your name." The bank flagged the account again. "We need to talk about this immediately." My blood ran cold. Evelyn had been using Tessa's identity to hide her financial crimes. My sister, innocent, oblivious Tessa, had become an unwitting accomplice in her mother's fraud. I copied the message, forwarded it to my email account, and deleted the evidence from Tessa's phone. My hands shook, but I felt alive, as if every ounce of pain I'd swallowed all these years had turned into laser-focused clarity. That night, I visited Maxwell Dunn's office. The afternoon light filtered through the old windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where countless family secrets had been untangled. When I showed him the evidence, his weathered face went pale. "Ivy, this is extensive. This is criminal, actually. Multiple felonies." "I know," I whispered. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "The question is, are you sure about this? Once we file a complaint, there's no going back. Your mother will face federal charges. Your sister will be implicated as an accessory, at least initially." I thought of Tessa, vain, cruel, but not evil. I thought of the moment when her complicity became crime. "We file the complaint," I said quietly. "But we make sure Tessa's lawyers get involved immediately. She was used. She's a victim here, too, even if she doesn't know it yet." Maxwell nodded slowly. "You're a remarkable young woman, Ivy. Your father would be proud." "I hope so," I said. "I'm finally being who he believed I could be." Evelyn must have sensed something was shifting because she started love-bombing me, her favorite form of control. Suddenly there were gifts. A silk scarf in my favorite color, a gold bracelet she'd worn for years, even an invitation to a spa day for us to reconnect and be closer. At dinner one evening, she held my hand across the table and said softly, "You know, I never meant to make you feel unloved. I was just so overwhelmed, being a widow, raising 2 daughters alone, managing the company. Sometimes I took things out on you, and I'm sorry." The words dripped with fake tenderness. They were designed to make me second-guess everything, to make me think maybe I'd been wrong, maybe she'd been suffering too, maybe I was being cruel for what I was about to do. I looked at her, really looked at her. The flawless hair, the painted smile, the woman who'd called me fake family in front of everyone. "I believe you, Mother," I said softly, my voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. Her eyes softened, pleased with herself. She squeezed my hand. "Good. We're finally moving forward. I knew you'd come around." I smiled back, knowing she had no idea how close she was to the edge, how the ground beneath her perfect life was about to crack wide open. Because while she plotted her next manipulation, I was preparing my final move, filing a federal complaint under her name, using every piece of evidence I'd collected. I was turning each of her lies into a blade, and soon she'd learn what it felt like to be cut by her own cruelty. The morning the audit letter arrived, Evelyn's scream echoed through the house like a wounded animal. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when she burst in, her robe half-tied, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She slammed a thick envelope on the counter, so hard the mug nearly tipped over. Coffee sloshed across the white marble. "Did you do this?" she hissed, her voice shaking with rage and something deeper, panic. I blinked innocently, my heart racing even as my face remained calm. "Do what?" She shoved the envelope toward me with shaking hands. They're auditing my accounts, my company. The IRS, Ivy. Someone tipped them off. Her voice cracked with panic, but her ego fought to maintain composure. She straightened her shoulders, feigning control even as her hands trembled. Don't think I won't find out who's behind this. I have lawyers. I have friends who... Mother, I said quietly. She stopped mid-sentence, turning to face me. Maybe it's karma, I said. Her lips parted. For a moment, she seemed to have difficulty processing the words. Karma? She repeated, almost laughing, though there was no humor in it. You really think the universe cares about you, Ivy? You've been a disappointment since birth. The words sliced deep, but this time I didn't bleed. This time I didn't flinch. I just stared at her, the woman unraveling before me, clutching her robe like a queen who'd just realized her crown was made of gold-painted cardboard. Don't worry, Mother, I said softly. You'll survive. You always do. But even as I walked away, I knew something had shifted. The predator had finally become the prey. That week, whispers started at the Callahan group like water seeping through cracks. Evelyn's immaculate image began to crack, like porcelain under pressure. Her assistant quit without notice. No 2 weeks, no explanation. Just gone. Victor stopped showing up to meetings. Clients canceled appointments without rescheduling. Even the board members grew distant, their calls returning to voicemail. Miriam, the receptionist, told me on a Tuesday that the FBI had been in the building. They had documents, she whispered. They were asking about accounts your mother set up. That evening, Tessa came to me in the kitchen where I was making tea. Her face was pale, her usual confidence shattered. Mom's been acting weird, she said, sitting down heavily on a stool. She got a call from a lawyer. Something about identity theft and fraud. They said my name is on accounts I never opened. Ivy, what's happening? This was the moment I'd been dreading. The moment where my sister had to confront the truth about our mother. I set down my cup and met her eyes. She used your identity to hide money, I said quietly. Victor Hale and your mother were embezzling from Dad's trust and moving it through shell companies. Your name was on some of the accounts. Tessa's face went white. What? No. That's... Mom would never. She already has, I said gently. I'm sorry, Tessa. I really am. She stood up abruptly, as if the chair had burned her. How do you know this? Because I investigated her, I said, and I reported it. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then understanding dawned, followed by anger, followed by something that looked like betrayal. You went after her, Tessa whispered. You turned on our own mother. I protected you, I corrected. And I protected Dad's legacy. I'm sorry that hurts. She left without another word. I heard the front door slam, hard enough to rattle the windows. Evelyn still tried to keep up appearances. She'd host brunches, smile for photos, and tell anyone who asked that the audit was routine, a simple misunderstanding. But behind closed doors, she was slipping. I heard her pacing at 2 a.m., whispering on the phone. Victor, you promised this wouldn't happen. You said you had people in the right places. Silence. Don't you dare leave me. If I go down, I'm taking you with me. I have everything in writing. More silence. A crash. The sound of glass shattering against the wall. The next morning, she came downstairs in full armor. Silk blouse, diamonds, perfect hair, as if pretending could erase reality. The makeup couldn't quite cover the shadow under her eyes. Don't you have work, Ivy? She said coolly. It's embarrassing having you loaf around while real adults handle things. I smiled faintly. Funny. I thought real adults didn't need to steal from their children's inheritance to feel powerful. Her face went white. Her mouth opened, then closed. The phone rang, the company line. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. That's when I knew the storm had finally reached her doorstep. 2 days later, Evelyn's empire began to crumble. not privately, but publicly, broadcast on the evening news. The headline ran across every local outlet. Callahan Group under investigation for financial misconduct. CEO Evelyn Callahan faces fraud charges. Tessa came bursting into my room, her phone in hand, her face streaked with tears. "What is this? Tell me it's fake." I looked up from my laptop, my heart steady. "It's not." She sank onto my bed, eyes wide with disbelief and hurt. "But Mom would never. I mean, yes, she's difficult, but this is... Ivy, what have you done?" "What I had to do," I said quietly. That evening, Evelyn gathered us in the living room. Her voice trembled, but her defiance was intact for now. This was her last stand. "This is a smear campaign," she said, gripping the back of an armchair. "Someone's trying to destroy me, trying to tear this family apart. You both have to stand with me. Family stands together." Tessa nodded instantly, the way she'd been trained to do since childhood. "Of course, Mom." I didn't nod. I didn't move. "Stand with you," I said quietly. "After everything you've done." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her mask slipping completely. "Everything I've done." She laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. "I gave you everything. I raised you. I kept a roof over your head after your father died and left us practically nothing." "He left me millions," I said calmly. "You just never told me." Silence crashed down like a stone. "You always needed someone to blame for your mediocrity," she continued, her voice rising now, venom dripping from each syllable. "You'll never be more than a shadow, Ivy. You can expose me, humiliate me, drag my name through the mud, but you'll still be nothing." "Nothing?" Tessa gasped. "Mom." But I didn't flinch. I met her glare head-on, and for the first time in my life I saw her clearly, not as the powerful mother who'd controlled me, but as a woman desperate to maintain an illusion that was crumbling faster than sand. "I guess we'll see who ends up with nothing," I said quietly. By the end of the week, the story went viral online. Pictures of Evelyn leaving her office in dark sunglasses, trying to hide, trying to escape, circulated with headlines like, "Socialite CEO faces tax fraud allegations. Embezzlement ring uncovered. The Callahan empire, built on lies, crumbling in real time. Woman exposes mother's crimes. The daughter who brought down an empire." I watched it unfold from my laptop, a strange mixture of sorrow and satisfaction twisting in my chest. She had built her empire on manipulation, charm, and fear, and now all three had turned against her. At dinner that night, the last dinner in that house, she tried to reassert control one final time. Her hands shook as she sliced into her steak. "This will blow over," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "I have friends in high places." Her phone buzzed. She reached for it, but her hand froze. Another headline, another photo, another crack in the wall. "Victor Hale named in financial scandal. Denies relationship with Evelyn Callahan." Her fork clattered against the plate. Tessa's voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, he denied even knowing you?" For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Evelyn smiled, too wide, too cold, the smile of someone whose mind was fracturing under pressure. "He's just protecting himself," she said numbly. "Everyone does what they must to survive." But the cracks had widened beyond repair. Her hands shook as she lifted her wine glass. Wine spilled across the white linen tablecloth like blood. "Don't look at me like that," she snapped at Tessa. "You think you're better than me? You wouldn't even exist without my charity, without my choices." And right then, for the first time, Tessa looked at her with pure disgust. The final blow came the night of the charity gala, the event Evelyn had called her crown jewel for 15 years. She insisted we all go. "Optics matter," she'd said that morning, forcing her brittle smile in the mirror. "We present a united front." I almost didn't go, but I realized I needed to. not to hurt her further, but to witness her facing the consequences of her choices. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and judgment. Crystal flutes clinked. Designer dresses whispered across marble floors. But the atmosphere had changed. People whispered behind their hands, pretending not to stare. Cameras flashed, not celebratory but predatory. Evelyn moved through the crowd like a ghost of her former self. Her gown was impeccable, Valentino, cream-colored, the uniform of wealth. But her dignity was in tatters. Then came the announcement. The director of the foundation took the stage. His face was grave, his voice solemn. Due to ongoing federal investigations, the Callahan Foundation will be placed under independent review. All funds will be frozen pending audit completion. Additionally, we regret to inform you that Mrs. Evelyn Callahan has been removed from her position as board chair, effective immediately. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Evelyn's hand shot out toward the microphone. Security moved to stop her, but she pushed past them, her composure finally completely shattering. "This is a mistake," she cried, her voice cracking through the silence. "I built this foundation. I built this family. This city owes me everything." Her words dissolved under the weight of murmurs and flashing cameras. Photographers surged forward. Reporters shouting questions. "Mrs. Callahan, are you pleading guilty? Will you cooperate with federal investigators? What do you have to say to the women who donated money thinking it would help others?" Tessa stood frozen beside me, tears streaming down her face as her entire world crumbled before her eyes. I stepped forward, not to save Evelyn, but to end it. I walked through the crowd, past the cameras, until I reached her. She turned when she sensed my presence. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the mother and daughter, the victor and the vanquished. "Come on, mother," I whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "It's over." Her head turned slowly, her painted smile trembling like a mask about to slip from her face. "You did this," she breathed, her eyes filled with a kind of hatred I'd never seen before, the kind born of a narcissist watching her reflection shatter in public. "No," I said quietly. "You did. I just stopped covering for you." And as the cameras clicked and the flashes exploded around us, I took her arm and led her toward the exit. Not with cruelty, not with satisfaction, but with the quiet strength of someone who'd finally broken free. In the 3 months that followed, Evelyn's world disintegrated into rubble. She was arrested on federal charges: embezzlement, tax fraud, identity theft, wire fraud. Victor Hale was arrested separately. He'd cooperated with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence, which meant he'd testified against her. They'd seized her assets, frozen her accounts, and she'd been forced to sell the estate to pay her legal fees. Tessa faced her own reckoning. At first, she was devastated to learn she'd been used, her identity weaponized by her own mother. But as the truth emerged, as she spoke with lawyers and realized she was primarily a victim, something shifted in her. She decided not to press charges against Evelyn, an act of mercy I hadn't expected from her. "She's my mother," Tessa told me one afternoon, after everything had settled. "I can't forgive her yet, but I can't destroy her completely either." I understood that. Forgiveness isn't about absolving someone of their crimes. It's about refusing to let their crimes define you. I visited Evelyn once, in the small apartment she'd rented with borrowed money. It was nothing like the Callahan estate, just a studio with bare walls and furniture from discount stores. She answered the door looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The expensive clothes were gone. Her hair, no longer perfectly styled, showed threads of gray. Without her armor of wealth and cruelty, she was just a woman I didn't recognize. "Ivy," she said, her voice flat, "I didn't expect to see you." "I came to say goodbye," I said. "Not goodbye to you. Goodbye to what we were, to what I let myself become in your shadow." She didn't speak. "The trial's in 6 months," I continued. I'm going to testify. I'm going to tell the truth about what you did. To me, to Tessa, to Dad's legacy. And then I'm going to let you go. I'm not going to hate you anymore, Mother. I'm just going to leave you." Her eyes filled with tears, the first real tears I'd ever seen from her. Not tears of manipulation, not tears of fury, but tears of genuine loss. "Ivy, Don't," I said gently. "There's nothing left to say. Goodbye, Mother." I left her there in that small apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of her empire. I didn't look back. 6 months later, I stood on the property my father had left me, the 15 acres of wild field and pine trees outside the city. The land was overgrown, untamed, beautiful in its wildness. Birds called from the trees. Wildflowers bloomed in purple and gold. It didn't look like anything, not yet, but it had potential. I decided what to do with it. I spent the next year working with architects and counselors to transform the land into something meaningful. The Callahan Foundation for Women in Recovery. Not my mother's twisted foundation, but something real, something honest. It was a refuge, a place where women who'd been damaged by narcissistic families, abusive relationships, and gaslighting could come to heal, where they could learn who they were beneath the lies people had told them about themselves. The ribbons were cut on a bright autumn morning. There were no reporters, no cameras, just women. So many women, some young, some old, some just beginning their journey out of darkness, others further along the path. One woman, a girl really maybe 17, came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I read about you," she said, "about what you did. I've been thinking, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe my mother really is the problem." I took her hands. "You're not crazy. You never were." "How did you get out?" she asked. "How did you survive it?" I thought about my father, about his letter, about the moment I decided that my worth wasn't determined by whether my mother acknowledged it. I remembered that I was somebody before she made me feel like nobody, I said, and I refused to forget it again. The federal trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in the witness stand and told the truth. I described the gaslit childhood, the favoritism, the emotional manipulation. I described finding the evidence of her crimes. I described everything, not with anger, but with the clarity of someone who'd finally seen, clearly. The prosecutor showed the jury the documents I'd collected, the transfer slips, the hidden accounts, the emails where she discussed stealing from her own children. Victor Hale testified too, corroborating the financial crimes. He received 5 years in a federal prison and fines of $2 million. He was a coward, like my father had always said. Evelyn's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter, a troubled girl seeking attention. But the evidence spoke louder than their narrative. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Evelyn was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. She'd be in her 70s when she got out, if she got out. Her assets were seized and liquidated to compensate the women who donated to her fraudulent foundation. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. There was no rage in her eyes anymore, just emptiness. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Sad for the woman she might have been if she'd chosen differently. Sad for the mother I'd never had. But I felt free. A year after the trial, I woke up to the sound of waves. I'd moved to the coast, a small cottage overlooking the ocean, far from the city and everything it represented. The Callahan Foundation was thriving under the leadership of a board of directors I'd carefully selected. Women ran it. Survivors ran it. It was the opposite of everything my mother had created. My mornings started with coffee on the porch. The sun would climb over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Gulls called in the distance. The air smelled like salt and possibility. I'd started writing. Not my story at first. I wasn't ready for that yet, but stories of the women who came to the foundation. With their permission, I was documenting their journeys, their awakenings, their transformations. One woman, a lawyer named Sarah, had told me something that stuck with me. I spent 30 years thinking I was broken because my mother told me I was broken. It took coming here, listening to your story, to realize that I was never the problem. The problem was that I believed her. That's when I understood the real victory. It wasn't about destroying my mother's empire. It was about helping other women see that they weren't the problem either. One evening, I sat at my desk and began to write. Not to my mother, not to my father, though I spoke to him often, out loud by the sea. I wrote to myself, Dear Ivy, do you remember the girl who stood in that dining room, holding a salad bowl, while her mother called her fake family? Do you remember how small you felt? How worthless? I want you to know that girl was never the problem. The problem was in the room with her. The problem was the woman at the head of the table, so threatened by your existence that she needed to diminish you just to feel powerful. You grew up in a house where love was conditional, where you had to earn affection by erasing yourself, where speaking the truth was punished and lies were rewarded. You learned to doubt your own perceptions, to apologize for taking up space, to question your sanity. And you survived it. More than that, you transcended it. The woman you are now is not the woman your mother feared you'd become. You're better than that. You're the woman your father believed you could be. You're brilliant, honest, and capable of holding space for others' pain while remaining whole yourself. You've learned that real power isn't about control. It's about truth. Real love isn't about manipulation. It's about acceptance. Real family isn't about blood. It's about choosing people who see you, honor you, and believe in you. You are not the sum of your mother's cruelty. You are not the product of her lies. You are your own creation now. You've built yourself from the ground up, brick by brick, choosing each brick consciously. And that is your greatest victory. Love, the daughter you became. It's strange how silence sounds different when you finally make peace with it. For years, I feared quiet moments. They echoed with my mother's voice, her lies, her endless need to make me small. The silence felt like an accusation, proof that I was unlovable, unremarkable, unworthy of noise. But now, silence feels like freedom. I walk the shoreline most evenings, when the sun begins to dip toward the horizon and the sky turns colors that don't have names. The sea glitters gold. The breeze carries something that almost feels like my father's voice. You did it, Ivy. I smile when I hear it because I know I did. The old Callahan estate is gone. Sold. Dismantled. The rose garden my mother used to parade through in her silk robes is wilted now, forgotten. Sometimes I drive past the property when I'm in the city. The gates hang crooked, the paint flaking like old secrets. And every time I see it, I realize that her empire didn't crumble because of me. It collapsed under the weight of her own deceit. The Callahan Foundation for Women in Recovery opened its doors 3 years ago. I still remember cutting the ribbon with trembling hands, surrounded by women whose stories sound painfully close to mine. Women who were made to feel invisible by the people they loved most. One of them hugged me that day. She whispered, "You made this possible. You're a hero." I told her the truth. So did you. You survived. You chose to change your story. That makes you the hero. Sometimes I receive letters from women who've been through the foundation. They tell me how my story gave them permission to finally tell theirs. How I showed them that the narrative their family had written for them wasn't the only story available. That's the real victory. Not the trial, not the conviction, but the transformation that ripples outward, touching lives I'll never meet, changing stories I'll never read. My mother sent me a letter from prison. I didn't open it for 6 months. When I finally did, it was brief. Ivy, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I see now, finally, clearly, without the fog of my own narcissism, what I took from you, what I took from Tessa, what I took from your father. I can't give it back. I can't undo it. but I can acknowledge it. And maybe that's the only apology that matters, the one where you don't ask for absolution, just understanding. You're stronger than I ever was. Braver. More honest. I'm proud of you, even if I never said it before. Mom. I read it once. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Some silences are necessary. Some distance is healthy. But I kept the letter because it represented something important. The moment when my mother finally saw me, really saw me. It was too late to matter to us, but it mattered to her. And in a strange way, that was enough. These days I live by the sea. My mornings start with the sound of waves tapping against the rocks and gulls calling in the distance. The air smells like salt and second chances. I have a life, now that's mine. A foundation that matters. Friendships built on honesty instead of performance. A quiet but deep peace that comes from knowing exactly who I am and refusing to let anyone rewrite that story. Sometimes I catch myself talking to my father as I watch the sun climb over the ocean. You'd be proud of me, Dad, I say softly. I didn't just survive her. I became everything she tried to destroy. I became whole. And maybe that's what real revenge looks like. Not fire, not scandal, not ruin, but peace. Peace so quiet it hums beneath your skin. Peace born from truth. From choosing yourself, from deciding that your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to recognize it. I proved my worth the only way that mattered, by living well, by loving honestly, by becoming whole again. And for the first time in my life, I'm not just part of a family. I am one, within myself, within the truth, within the peace I built from everything she tried to break. If you've made it this far, you understand. Respect is non-negotiable. Your worth isn't defined by who gets the credit, who your family believes first, or where they seat you at their table. I spent 28 years negotiating my value for scraps of approval. But silence can be a weapon, and patience can be power. My mother's empire didn't crumble because I destroyed it. It collapsed under her own lies. I simply stopped covering for her. I simply told the truth. If this resonated with you, share it with someone gaslit into invisibility. Tell them, your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. The revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories about setting boundaries, finding your worth, and turning humiliation into triumph. Your worth was never in question. It was only ever waiting to be remembered. Now go remember it. Build your table. Claim your space. The people who call you selfish are people who benefited from your silence. The people who call you ungrateful counted on your compliance. When they use those words, understand, they're admitting they've lost control. And that's when your real life begins.